Hey, I'm Alan Wolk, the co-founder and lead analyst at TVREV, and I wanted to welcome all of you here to our panel, which is called What's Next for Niche OTTs. I have four really smart people up on stage with me, or up on screen with me, as the case may be, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you guys. I'm going to start off with my list here with Mr. Terry Lee. If you could just sort of give your name, what you do, and a little bit about your company, and then we can, so the audience knows who we are and why they should care about what you have to say. So Terry, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. Hey, everyone. I'm Terry. I'm the Senior Vice President of Emerging Businesses and the General Manager of Games at Crunchyroll, which is part of the Sony Pictures Entertainment family. Crunchyroll is basically the world's largest anime entertainment company. We started with anime streaming, and today we expanded into theatricals, digital and physical manga, DVDs, theatricals, releases, games, merchandise, e-commerce, and we are home to essentially the largest anime community outside of Japan.
Excellent, excellent. And yeah, Crunchyroll is a name most people are probably familiar with. Next, Daniel, if you can give us your bio and background.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Dan Barker, currently work for NASCAR, a motorsports. Well, let's say it's our 75th anniversary this year, so we've been in the business for a while of motorsports. My role within NASCAR is really to drive our OTT and streaming strategy, whether that is internally or with external partners. Been here around 3.5 years now. Prior to that, spent some time at DAZN, which is obviously a streaming proprietor themselves. So I've been in sports media for about 15 years. Spent the last 5 or 6 years really focusing in on the streaming and OTT world.
Excellent. And next up, we have Jonathan Barbato. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes. Yeah, Barbato. Yeah, very good. Yes. Barbato, potato. Jonathan here. I'm co-CEO of Best Ever Channels. We're an independent production and distribution studio. We have 2 SVOD channels, 9 FAST channels, and about a dozen AVOD categories that we supply content for the streaming universe.
Excellent. And last but not least, Randall Green.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Randy Green. I'm president of Veranda Entertainment. We're both a distributor and we have our own AVOD platform, Butaca TV. And Butaca's platform focuses on Spanish language film and TV. And we reach users in the US and throughout Latin America. We've recently, just this past month, we've been acquired by MyCode Media, which is the largest multicultural media company in the US. Veranda's the connected TV division, and we're going to be using our AVOD technology to build platforms and fast channels. We also have 4 different fast channels that we distribute to various platforms, to big platforms. So that's Veranda.
Okay, and TVREV, for those of you who are not familiar with it, we are both a publication, a website, and an analyst firm. Among the things we do as an analyst firm is issue special reports that we get sponsors for. And our most recent one is called Fasts Are the New Cable. And that is available for free from our website, but that's not why I'm bringing it up. One of the things I just wanted to sort of, before we start the conversation, one of the things that we found when we were talking to people for the report is that there's a lot of confusion around the nomenclature of what people call things, that everybody seems to have different names for different things. And in talking to executives, it just seemed like it was we could simplify this. So for purposes of this conversation and for your conversations at home, basically it boils down to 2 business models: free and not free. Subscription and no subscription needed. So fast and SVOD. Underneath that, you have 2 different manners of distribution. You have linear and on-demand. And a lot of people are surprised. The SVOD service, the big SVOD services in the US are starting to roll out linear channels already. The assumption is most of them will. It's just an easy way to get library content out there. And for ads, it's a way to increase engagement. And then within the subscription, there's an ad-free and ad-supported model. So what's interesting about that is the term AVOD seems to sort of be the prime offender of confusion, because it sometimes means free, sometimes it means subscription. So people are using it less and less. And despite it being in the title of the panel, OTT seems to have just sort of been like very 2020. Everybody's calling it CTV or streaming or whatnot. So anyway, a little bit that's my contribution to making things simple in the industry. That's sort of one of the things we try and do. But now to these guys who are much smarter and more interesting than I am. So I'm going to start with Terry and Crunchyroll. So any anime fan, is pretty familiar with Crunchyroll. You guys are like, the number one in there. But how would you describe Crunchyroll to people who don't understand the company and sort of what you're up to now? Because you've been a bunch of different things over the last year, a few years, and where are you right now? In terms of distribution. Let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the folks outside of the anime space, Crunchyroll is really sort of a preeminent anime kind of entertainment destination, right? And so we focus a lot on streaming media. Of course, that's how we started our business, and we secure a vast majority of the content coming out of Asia and Japan, where anime is based off of, and we distribute to a couple hundred countries, 9 different languages, and a very broad range of customer bases. And then as the company has evolved, we tacked on other elements of the overall entertainment and lifestyle around anime. So that's why we got into some of the theatrical releases. Crunchyroll does some of the largest theatrical anime releases in the West. And then we tacked on mobile games, we tacked on merchandising, consumer products, manga, and DVDs. So we want to offer a holistic experience to the fans of anime.
Gotcha. And how is it actually sort of distributed? Are you your own app? Do you have channels on other apps?
Yeah, sorry, I missed that part. So we have an own operated platform. Basically people come onto Crunchyroll and sign in, and our own app is distributed across dozens of devices, all the major game consoles, smart TVs, major connected devices, and we don't distribute as a sub-channel or anything on the other, say, aggregate offerings.
Gotcha. And is it free? Is it ad-supported? How does that piece work?
Yeah, we have several tiers. There is an ad-supported tier for us. A lot of that is how we think of introducing anime to fans, and we give them sort of like a preview of various seasons of popular shows. Most of our content is behind the subscription package, and there's different tiers based on how many devices you want simultaneous coverage to, the various language access, quality access, simultaneous streams, and perks into the rest of what we call the flywheel ecosystem. Perks to discounts on commerce, access to game currencies, etc.
Right. And do you have advertising on any of it?
Yeah, we have an AVOD tier where we work with select programmatic ad partners and some major sponsors, and we do put in ads as pre-rolls and interstitials. But a big part of our strategy is really the ad tier for us is really a means to introduce the content to fans. We find most of the value of what we offer to be packaged up into the overall membership.
Right. And who is your fan base? Like, is it fairly easy to say, hey, it's mostly young men? Is it mostly, just is it pretty spread out among different sort of, demographics an advertiser or programmer might be interested in? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? I think, I've been at the company for a while. So when we first started, I would have very easily said, it's probably like, 70-30 male and skewing young. I think since then, I'm very fortunate and happy to have been proven, again and again, wrong, that the audience for anime has continued to expand. We've grown 30x since I've been there. So, today it's certainly still skews a little bit male, but the age ranges are very, very vast, right? Because you have generational fans that grew up in the 80s with anime and that their kids are now watching and they watch with their kids. We have a lot of shows that are catered towards both the individual, the younger side, and the broader family side. So for us, it is pretty representative of a full gamut entertainment with a slight skew of people who are into niche.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. So now from anime to racing, Dan, tell me a little bit about NASCAR. You're sort of the head of the DTC strategy there. What is the structure of NASCAR's OTT, OTT offering?
Yeah, so it's NASCAR is a many tentacled beast with a lot of different departments. We own a lot of racetracks, we own a lot of real estate, but we also have our own digital output, obviously. And what really drives a lot of the revenue of our business is the media rights business, of which, of course, OTT is increasingly relevant in that space. So as such, me and my organization sit inside of the broadcast and production arm of NASCAR rather than the digital arm, because so much of what we do is driven by finding the right OTT partner rather than creating our own product solutions, right? So what's been interesting for us is when I joined the company, we were smack in the middle of an existing rights deal that lasted 10 years. That rights deal expires at the end of 2024. We start those conversations early next year with our incumbent partners. What that meant was, in the sort of short to medium term, our OTT strategy was focused on getting smarter about understanding the space, obviously, but also leveraging the sort of uncovered and under-leveraged things that we did own within our rights portfolio. And that's really been where our focus has been in the sort of short to medium term, is create good partnerships with OTT platforms, gather intelligence, gather data, how they operate, what they can deliver, what they struggle to deliver, how it fits with Nielsen ratings, how it doesn't fit with Nielsen ratings, all of that stuff. Right. And then, that intelligence will then allow us to make better and more informed decisions as we enter our rights cycle next year. And then, the second piece of it is we've now built the value, we believe, and we certainly hope it bears out, that we've built the value of our long tail portfolio too, right? So our other properties that weren't necessarily well covered and monetized are now in a much healthier place because of our ability to do partnerships with, like the one that we have with Flow Sports, where we distribute a lot of our long tail rights to. So that's sort of where we are at the minute in the NASCAR cycle as it relates to OTT and streaming.
Right. And if someone did want to watch some of your programming, where could, say in the US, where can they find it?
So our incumbent partners right now, we have, as you can imagine, signing a deal 9 years ago, it's pretty linear heavy. We distribute our top tier packages. Our Cup Series events are split between Fox and NBC. NBC recently closed down their NBC Sports cable channel. We moved into USA Network there. There are a couple of events per year that go into Peacock as part of our sort of legacy agreement. We anticipate that NBC would like more of that in Peacock next year, or in 2024. So our top tier packages are with NBC and Fox. And then, as I said, our long tail is more with Flow Sports, who we signed a deal with at the end of last year and have just rounded out our first year. So those are the current partners.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love Flow Sports. I know those guys.
Those guys are great.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, as you probably saw, NBC just moved a bunch, or NBC just moved a bunch of their regional sports networks over to Peacock this week.
Yeah.
Which should hopefully be good news for you guys. They seem to be moving like a decent amount of the sports content over there, and hopefully they realize you guys are a sport.
Well, they've certainly been happy with us so far, so we look forward to talking with them in the new year as well.
Okay, so next up, I want to talk to Jonathan. So tell me about Best Ever Channels. What is it? What's unique about it? How did it come about? Like, why would I want to watch it? And then after that, I'll follow. I have some bunch of follow-ups, but let's start with that. What is it, and how did it come about?
Yeah, it started as a horror story. Well, seriously, what happened is Pluto hired my digital agency to promote their horror channels, and for audience acquisition and retention, did a great job, worked really well. The next were classic channels, and I lined up the promotion for that. And it was January 2019, which you probably know is when Viacom bought them. And so all agencies were put on hold, including us. So I did the next best logical thing, which is put a bid in for 2 classic channels myself that were underperforming, but I had all of the promotion ready to go. And then somebody started bidding against me, my partner, Barry Gordon, who became my partner, Barry Gordon. And we bought the technology to launch on multiple streaming channels on all the platforms. Fast came around, saw that coming, and so now we've got 9 channels. We've got 3 tent poles. We've got a comedy channel with Stand in New York, the largest comedy venue, and also they manage a lot of talent. So Pete Davidson is a partner in the company, and everyone from TJ Miller to Dave Chappelle, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing original content for that channel. We're doing a channel with Spin Magazine, the iconic music brand, and we'll be doing original content there as well. So for us, it's about Fast 2.0, which is original and much more of a linear brand than just an aggregate of content. We have another tentpole, which is in the health, wealth, and wisdom category, with major players in that category, from Byron Katie to Deepak Chopra to on and on and on. And in all of those cases, what we're doing is we're working with the content creators as well as the influencers to, in my mind, niche means avid audience. And so we work with the audiences to do the marketing as much as we can for us, with us, and with the channels.
Gotcha. And how are you guys distributed? Is it your own apps? Do you create channels for other, for bigger aggregators?
All of the above. So
Okay.
We have our own apps for some of the channels. Soon all of them will be there. We have the 2 SVOD channels up on Amazon. So those are distributed through Amazon. And then we have the fast channels on as many platforms as possible. Barry and I both think that the days of creating a destination and trying to get people to one place are kind of over. It's about getting the content as far and wide as possible. So that's our strategy.
Yeah, no, that seems to be where things are. And I thought it was interesting you're talking about the sort of Fast 2.0, which is this sort of push to quality, where the entire ecosystem is sort of saying, okay, no more Susie's yoga studio that she shoots on her iPhone, and we're gonna get much. Well, you've had stuff that's not above that, but and move there. Now, are you finding that they're taking your entire channel as is, or are they saying, okay, we're going to take it, we're going to make it part of our comedy channel, or it's a little bit of both?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, and we're good with that. We have a production company that produces for Netflix and HBO for years and years and years. So the quality is there, and we figured out the economics. We're growing with the ecosystem as it grows. So we're willing to create original content for CTVs or platforms, but we're also, very focused on creating our own brands and really getting them out there as well. So we're having all those conversations.
Right. And what are you guys doing to promote? Like, given like, say, NASCAR, Dan has a huge advantage. NASCAR has a huge built-in fan base. There's millions of people. So does Terry with Crunchyroll. How are you getting the word out that these?
So does Dave Chappelle. So does TJ Miller. Spin Magazine is going to launch at South by Southwest in March. So so we're all about the events and the aggregation of a lot of different strategies at once.
Okay, so Chappelle is actually promoting it for you and saying, "Hey, fans, come watch me here," and whatnot. So
we'll be promoting through our influencers, also doing all the traditional marketing, working with the platforms, everything.
Right. Okay, and Randall, so you have an interesting play too, because you're focusing on sort of Spanish language things. You have this new thing called Butaca, and then you guys were just also sort of acquired by somebody. It's one of the which is one of the largest multicultural firms in the U.S. So what's happening with? Let's start off with what's happening with you guys. How you sort of came about, and then we'll talk about sort of trends in Hispanic media in the U.S. So let's start with your origin story, if you will.
Well, we started actually 17 years ago, and Veranda Entertainment was a traditional distribution company. We started out doing film and TV content. We found that we were more geeks, so we started doing streaming and tech type stuff, and then we, about 5 or 6 years ago, we were distributing to the big players of the Amazons and the Plutos and Tubies, and we decided that they weren't servicing our market, which was, we had a really large Spanish language catalog, so we decided to create our own platform, and that's how it became. And then the hardest part when you're a small player like me is to how do you monetize your content, especially if you're in places you're outside of the U.S. in Mexico, where the CPM and the fill rates much lower. And so we were acquired. We partnership with my code media, and suddenly we have this large advertising sales force, both in the U.S. and Mexico. So we're very excited. My code's also talking to not only the Hispanic audience, but also to Asian audiences, to the black audience, Pride, women. So we are the connected TV division that's going to be creating platforms and channels for all of our groups.
Gotcha. And do you feel like, how are you guys sort of, promoting and distributing? Like, do you have, are you working through aggregators? Do you have your own apps? Like, how is this getting out to the audience? Let's talk about US, because I know, and then you can talk about how it works outside the US.
Yeah, so we did build our own apps, and we're so we've got the standard iOS and Androids and Roku's and Fire TV apps, but we also work with large platforms, Vizios and Samsungs and the Roku channel. So we do have a multi-platform approach of not only our own platform, but using our large platforms too. So it's just a combination, and it's just to get reach.
No, that makes sense. So I just wanted to have a sort of quick aside on something, sort of picking up on something that Jonathan said about, that having a destination app may not be all that anymore. And that these big aggregator apps, whether it's, basically it seems to boil down that there's some that are owned by the media companies. You have, Pluto is part of Paramount, Peacock is part of NBCU, Tubi is Fox, and then you've got the device OEMs, which is an interesting place. You have Roku and Amazon, were the OG, and then you also have, as Randy was just mentioning, you have Samsung, Vizio, and LG have all launched these sort of fast services. So I'm curious. I'll start with you, Dan. Like, do you got and not even necessarily for NASCAR, but just as general, like, do you think sort of that's where we're heading, towards more of an aggregated experience where you've got multiple channels on one platform? And what are the sort of pros and cons of not having your own app?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it through the live sports lens, right? Because that's what I come from. For us as a sport and a governing body, we want to increase the size of our audience, the exposure for our racing as much as possible. So wide distribution is really important to us. It's why linear remains an important part of our business, and we anticipate it will remain an important part of our business in the next ride cycle, and why we take such a vested interest in how quick or not quick the growth of these various OTT and streaming platforms are. But that ability to drive audience to live events for us is probably the most important piece of the puzzle. So that wide distribution is critical. What do you lose when you do that? Well, you lose some data for sure. That's probably the biggest, I think, challenge that we face as a rights holder with some of the OTT partners, is that I always use the line from the show Deadwood, a lie agreed upon. And that's in a way what Nielsen is, right? It's we've all sort of agreed on these sets of data, yes, by which we measure advertising. We don't yet really have that sorted in the OTT and streaming space. So that's one of the challenges, is you don't get a full 360 view of your audience quite as well when you go with, external partners. But the size of that reach is just so important to us. And I think that will be true for all of sports properties, is they're looking for the biggest reach possible, which, like I said, the balance between linear and OTT becomes a really interesting one when you're trying to balance that reach with the needs of the aggregated partners.
Okay, so Terry, I'm curious your take on this, because you precede all this aggregation stuff. I mean, you guys were like the OG, in the space, and you saw the rise of these guys. So what's your take? I mean, because you do have a really strong platform on your own, but if you sort of take Crunchyroll out of the equation, like for newcomers, is going with an aggregator and just trying to get your content on their channels a better move, or are there still advantages for certain markets to try and make your own app, or maintain your own app, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, a big part of our thinking and what I would tell new entrants is really, what do you think your relationship with your consumer base is, and how deep that goes, right? I think anime as a fundamental medium is so deep that we think we can build enough of a relationship, and there's more ways than one to engage with that audience beyond streaming, that for us, aggregating our content, actually, we lose that touch point with the consumer, and then we lose the entire cycle from beginning to end from all the other flywheels, right? Commerce, games, everything. So that's not worth it to us. And our medium is a format where the content is strong enough to pull audience in. We don't need to push out, right? And so audiences will find us. But I can certainly see how, depending on the content that you represent, if it's content that it's hard to get exclusively, or it's hard to wrap around other experiences around, then reach is king. Then you will want aggregation. So it just depends on how deep, depth versus breadth, right?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Randy, so in your world, because you guys are just sort of still starting this up, and you're looking for a fairly niche audience, where do you net add on this? And sort of also, I wanted to also check in, what's sort of unique about the content that you guys are doing compared to other, say, Spanish language media? Is there something about it that differentiates it?
Yeah, well, Spanish language is the second in terms of first language speaking in the worldwide. Yet within that big group, there's many different groups. A user habit in Argentina or Spain is much different than in Mexico. And then in the US, you have first generation, you've got second generation, you've got, if you're in California, you've got much different user habits than in Florida, New York. So what we're doing is we're building our linear fast channel, addressing these different user groups is much different. So it's just different. It's a different experience than if you're going to go to Pluto or even Tubi. So that's kind of where we're taking that approach. We're more into the pop-up restaurants than the long-term restaurants. So we'll see it, we'll put it up. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll take it down.
Gotcha. But is there some genre that you're specializing in, or some type of, are you looking at sort of new voices? Are you taking more traditional stuff from different countries and saying, hey, if you're from Argentina and you're in the US, here's some of your favorite programming? Like, what's your sort of content play?
we're looking at all. We're everything from classic films to new contemporary films to telenovelas to even we're experimenting with some of the short form stuff down the road. We're going to be looking at. So it's really across the board. You know, looking at even looking at some of the studio films and dubbing them for Spanish. So just creating a unique experience is the goal. So I think it goes across the across the board in terms of
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. So, Jonathan, I want to come back to you on this too, because you're on that weird bubble where you have that, you have enough name power in some of your guys to maintain an app, but at the same time, I could see why, yes, a channel that has Dave Chappelle programming on it could be very attractive to some of these big aggregators. Where are you guys? Are you guys just sort of playing that, or how are you thinking about it? More long term, even.
Well, I'm Italian, so I'm going to play off Randall's food analogy and just say, I think that we all have different appetites for different things at different times, even if it's the same food. And the same is true for this content, the content that we have, and I think all content to some extent. So I think that, the bigger platforms are great to give a sampling, to give a taste of what we have, to get discovered. And then when you want to dive deeper into any one of the categories that we have, or anyone has in a channel, then you'll want to go to a destination that dives deep and look at if there's exclusive content and it's worthy of it, then maybe even subscription at that point. But for us, it's more about what content to put where and how to draw the audience in, how to get discovered.
Gotcha.
People go out to a restaurant for one thing, but they cook at home for another, right?
Gotcha. So in your restaurant, is there a prefix or is it a la carte and prefix? Is it just all sort of linear, or is there also sort of on demand that I can access?
Both. So we do have linear, and that's where we get discovered, and that's the sampling. Yes. And then if you really like the appetizer, we've got the prefix, and we also have subscription for the deeper dive. So.
Okay, that's interesting. So I wanted to also something else that comes up a lot when you talk about OTT, just in general, is somebody was mentioning is the myth. I think it was Dan, the myth of Nielsen and how we're measuring all this. So I'm curious. So I'll start with you, Jonathan. We can go around. What are some of the how are you looking at metrics, and is it easy to get metrics from? Because I've sometimes heard it is not from some of these aggregators, and being nice about that. And what sort of metrics are you looking for? As you go forward, especially because you want to be, if you're running advertising, you want to be able to charge for it, and if you're running programming, you want to be able to say, hey, we've got these many people watch. So how does that all work? And I'm gonna get everybody's input.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's no secret, or shouldn't be to anyone, that the metrics vary from platform to platform. Sometimes you get a lot, sometimes you get very little, and the level of metrics that you get sometimes have relevance, sometimes they don't. So I mean, we get most of our analytics from Whirl, who's our content distribution partner. So they'll give us a pretty deep dive into how many occurrences and views and sessions and session times and that sort of thing. I tend to look at, I'm looking for what the audience likes, right? I want to give the audience more of that, and then I want to use that to get more advertising. So I'll look at the number of occurrences and the number of sessions and maybe the number of completions, and I'll look for those runaway hits. Hey, I only put this on a little bit, but it's getting watched a lot. That tells me the audience wants it. It's not just something I programmed well or didn't program well, as the case may be. So I'm looking at analytics for programming. And then, of course, we do want to get deeper and deeper into direct advertising. And if I can prove that a particular program attracts a particular audience, that's always going to be helpful. Sometimes I can do that with the viewing analytics that I get.
Gotcha. And what is an occurrence? Just out of curiosity, I'm not familiar with that.
So how many times I put a show up, or an episode of a show up, versus how many times it's actually watched and how many times it's actually completed, and those kinds of things I get. Yeah.
Gotcha. So Terry, I'm going to turn this to you because you've probably seen everything under the sun in the last 20 years or so in terms of measurement. But what do you guys look for in measurement, and how does that play out within the organization?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we measure all aspects of consumption, right? So that's basically king for us because if we're able to determine how deeply you engage and how quickly you engage, then we can make a lot of decisions, not just around what else we put in front of you, but honestly, it informs our decision around like how we invest into content acquisition, how we invest into just broader appeals towards the customer, and how we invest towards user acquisition. So all kinds of consumption metrics around genre, format, length, time, and of course how quickly you react. Our content is structured based on releases and release schedules, right? So it's very seasonal. We acquire series on a quarterly basis, and they go off on specific schedules. So depending on when the premieres happen, or depending on when the releases happens, we monitor how quickly people uptick in that first hour versus the first week versus the first month. So a lot of that becomes crucial for us. So that, by the way, that's the other aspect, to your question earlier, Alan, around like, aggregate or not. For us, because the data is so important around consumption, there is some element where it's advantageous for us to not aggregate and to get all that ourselves.
Right. And what sort of measurement, like, are you using, who are you using for measurement? Or is it sort of, is it just you, because you have your own platform, you're able to see it? Or are you using sort of certainly the ACR vendors, or how is that working?
Yeah, we don't use any specific single vendor, right? Like we pull in a lot of different measurement tools, but ultimately we build our own what we call like a consumer insights and data insights team. So we have a dedicated team that has a dedicated build out that hooks into all aspects of our products, whether it's the app, whether it's the site, whether it's some of our flywheel kind of business apps. And so it's pretty homegrown.
Right. No, and that's like sort of to me, one of the most fascinating things about OTT is just the ability to use data for all these things that was, 100%. Not available on old school TV. So Dan, I want to turn that to you guys. How are you guys, as you're going forward, do you have thoughts on how you're going to use data and sort of how you're using it now in measurement?
Yeah, I think, look, I will say this, to Nielsen's credit, they're working very hard on solving a lot of these solutions for us. So we appreciate their efforts in the space. And to Flow's credit, they do provide us with a lot of good data around consumption. What we found is there's two real reasons for desiring and needing that consumption data. First among them is so much of our industry is driven by commercial partners and sponsors, and being able to give those sponsors and partners, I mean, we have 30 to 40 cars on track every week, and they all have multiple sponsors on that car. We need to be able to communicate clearly to those sponsors how many eyeballs saw a Mars logo or an Ally logo, or what have you. So that visibility into consumption is really important because so much of our industry and business is driven by the size of the audience that we're able to reach. I think the other thing that's a challenge there too, speaking candidly, is there's an education piece to that as well, right? Like, again, going back to Nielsen, there are numbers that everybody sort of understands from a sponsorship and commercial perspective. Communicating what a unique is versus what a viewer is versus what time spent looks like from this platform to this platform to linear versus OTT, I think it is part of the challenge, and just educating the industry and the people that spend money in the industry on what success looks like from a data perspective in streaming and OTT is one of our challenges. And then the other thing, and Jonathan mentioned it earlier, just to get a better sense of, and so did Terry, to get a better sense of what you're doing right and what you're not doing right, and what content's working and resonating and what's not working and resonating. We work really closely with Flow to understand which content we deliver is working, and we fund that at a higher rate to make sure that we're doing more of that and less of this and what have you. So, I mean, I think understanding our fans' habits and communicating to the industry what success looks like in a streaming space, I think, are the two real reasons we need more robust data than, I think we'd all acknowledge that we all get from aggregators at the moment. Which I understand why they do.
Now, yes. No, of course. Now with Flow, it's interesting. I know they have. My daughter runs track, and she's D1, and so we've been very into that, and also that's why I'm familiar with them. Like, are there community sites, sort of message board and whatnot for NASCAR on Flow? Because do you pull data from that as well? And use that
absolutely. So one of the things we did with the rights fee that we received from Flow was we used it to build out our editorial, social, and marketing strategy for the rights that they have. So that's helped us a lot, right? We've been able to really build up, again, our long tail rights, what we call NASCAR roots. We've been able to invest in that thanks to the partnership with Flow, and that obviously provides us with a ton of data in terms of engagement on social and across our own .com properties and what have you. So we've been able to, and one thing I will say for Flow is we were shocked and delighted by is just the avidity that people have for that platform. Yes. I think the fact that, and it speaks to the niche element, the fact that they service really avid fans of particular niche sports, I think serves them so well, and really keeps a lot of people loyal to that platform.
Yes. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Flow Sports in the audience, I realize we should probably explain what it is. It's a company, and they maintain a series of sites for, as Dan was saying, niche sports, but not like super niche, like things like track, lacrosse, wrestling, NASCAR. So not like not curling or thing. And they may have a curling site for all I know, but it's sports that are fairly people are familiar with and do tend to have a strong collegiate and and post collegiate even fan base. So so they're great. Check them out if you haven't. It is a subscription site for most of it, but it's still if you're into one of those sports. Here's my free plug for my Flow friend. So Randy, I didn't get to you on this. Now you have an even bigger challenge because you're trying to do this internationally, right? Like how are you handling all that?
Well, I think data, our data capture is the same in the U.S. or whether it's in Mexico or the U.S. or wherever. But I think what's interesting that to me with this whole fast direction is how data informs our programmers. We know exactly, specifically, how many minutes per episode of a certain series someone might watch. So we'll know when people drop. We'll know. So it is really a very important tool that we use to program our linear fast channels, and I think most of the panelists do the same.
Okay. So we've got about 4 minutes left here. So I think I'm just going to sort of do a lightning round, if you will, about one of the things that I hear, and I'm sure you guys do too, from your non-industry friends, which is about discovery, not the TV network, but about how tough it is to find things that you want to watch. And, other than, I know I often resort to Google. Where can I watch X? How do we make that? I'm just going to go back around in the circle. How can we make that easier? I'll start with you, Jonathan. How do we make discovery easier, on these various platforms?
Well, I actually wanted to start a company doing exactly that, but the problem is an incumbent one to the media industry who's trying to protect itself here or there or everywhere. So from that perspective, I don't know that it'll ever get solved, but I think the important thing is to find the audience that you're going after wherever they are, whether it's on television or not, and let them know that you're there, and that's how you break through. But yeah, I don't think the overall problem is going to be solved anytime soon.
Terry,
we use we partner with major groups within the community, right? We find fandoms where they are, pockets where they are. That's the advantage of niche content, is there's generally a community forum or group that already exists, and we work with them, we partner with them to figure out how to tap into the fans and find viewers, whether that's physical events, whether that's live online discussion forums, whether that's other partner sites. So, you know, we grew a lot through a combination of smart user acquisition marketing, but also, you know, just very selective partnerships. So I think don't go at it alone, I guess is the thesis, and find people that you can partner with.
No, that's good. Randy.
Yeah, I think just knowing your audience, you know, really where it is, and delivering a UI and UX that can deliver the right stuff to the right people. So it's hard. It's a challenge.
Yes. And Dan, I'll give you the last word here.
I have this great idea where you print out a magazine once a month and you send it to people. And it tells you where you can find stuff and when to watch it. In all seriousness, in all seriousness, we're very lucky to be live, right? So we tend to butt in front of everybody by the nature of it being live sports. Yeah, it also helps for people like Terry that have such a strong brand that people just, he's, you know, they're the Kleenex of anime. So it helps to have a strength of brand like that too, I think. But yeah, I think there's something to that magazine idea if I was really pushing.
Yes. Something guide would be a good name. Just a thought. Anyway, we are at time here. So thank you guys so much. This was really great. The time just 45 minutes just flew. So thank you all very much. And thank you to the audience. And thank you, Nextv, for hosting us.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.